Hello, and welcome to the fourth part of our five-part series about the four agreements by the spiritual teacher within the Toltec tradition, Don Miguel Ruiz. If you haven't listened to the introduction yet, it's advisable to do so, even if all parts are made so that they can stand on their own. There's a link to it in the description. Now, many of our deepest problems begin with us assuming we know things that we don't, not just about other people, but about ourselves, God, relations, and the world in general. The third agreement is mainly about the relational aspect of this, but it can be a very worthwhile exercise to, on a regular basis, ponder what we truly know and how many irrelevant factors, both inner and outer, shape what we assume. The third agreement in the four agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz is don't make assumptions. This agreement is about freeing oneself from the mental habit of forming assumptions, particularly about other people's actions, thoughts, and motivations. Assumptions tend to create misunderstandings, confusion, and unnecessary conflict in personal relationships and interactions. The agreement encourages us to ask questions, seek clarity, and express what we truly want or need, rather than letting assumptions drive our responses. This does not mean that we don't sometimes need to try and guess the motivations of other people for practical reasons of one sort or another, as when we try to figure out what someone wants when something prevents clear communication, or when we have good reasons not to be satisfied with the answers we've gotten, despite our best efforts at clear communication. What we're talking about here is our ego-based tendency to make up fantasies about what other people think or intend instead of asking questions, and then invest emotions in those assumptions and interact with others based on them. Thus, in daily life, we all make assumptions, sometimes about trivial things, sometimes about important ones. We assume we know what others are thinking, how they feel, or what they mean. Often, we do this without even realizing it, and the consequences can be detrimental. By making assumptions, we frequently set ourselves up for disappointment, frustration, and emotional suffering because we misinterpret situations or over-personalize events. For example, have you ever found yourself upset because a friend didn't call you back, and you assumed they were angry with you? You might replay the last conversation over and over in your mind, looking for reasons why they might be upset. But when you finally talk to them, you learn they were simply busy or preoccupied with something unrelated. All that stress and anxiety were built on an assumption, which had no basis in reality. Furthermore, we assume that others know what we are thinking and feeling. This expectation places an unfair burden on the people around us, leading to disappointment. When they don't respond or behave in the way we assume, it can breed resentment. We feel hurt or betrayed, but in reality, the fault lies in the fact that we never clearly communicated our needs or clarified their intentions. Take a moment to think about how much unnecessary conflict and suffering is caused by this simple habit. For what? Because we have lots of shoulds with regards to other people that are really built on nothing. Some may have heard the saying, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?" You may think that other people should know what you want and wish for without you having to say it. And you may be very convinced that you know what they are thinking or the motives behind their words and actions. And maybe they should know this or that, maybe your assumptions are correct, and maybe you can even get them to admit all of it. But have you really gained something from it? Has your relationship benefited from it? This is something that you will realize more and more as you wake up from the collective dream, the one that is more and more starting to look like a nightmare for many people. It's about you waking up and starting to see things more clearly, to see that the rigidity of our egos creates lots of lose-lose situations because of the ego's needy, prideful demands and its illusions that it needs certain things in order to be happy, and that many of these situations could be win-win instead if the ego got out of the way. The tendency to assume often stems from our fears and insecurities, which are also based in the ego. We are afraid to ask questions or express ourselves directly because we fear rejection, confrontation, or appearing vulnerable. Yet, when we replace assumptions with open communication, we take control of our interactions. We remove the veil of misunderstanding and create opportunities for meaningful connections. By asking, we are no longer guessing what someone else feels or thinks. We are basing our responses on the truth they share. To put this into practice, a helpful approach is to ask more questions. Asking clarifies misunderstandings and helps prevent you from assuming you know all the answers. If you're uncertain about someone's intentions or feelings, ask them rather than create a story in your mind. Communication is the key to avoiding the pitfalls of assumption making. Communication is, in general, something that most of us need to bring more consciousness into, and it is a key aspect of the 4 agreements. We have a tendency not only to make assumptions when we communicate, but we are also often careless and sloppy with our speech, distort reality in different ways, take what other people say when they are in an emotionally aroused state as personal insults, and so on. Just like with what is going on in our inner lives, communication is an incredibly important part of the human experience, and what kind of impact we have on the world and the people around us. And yet, most people basically just allow it to happen without giving much thoughts to it. Another common scenario involves making assumptions about how others perceive us. For instance, we might assume our colleagues don't respect us because they didn't acknowledge a contribution we made in a meeting. Or we assume a loved one is upset with us because they seemed quiet or distant during a conversation. These assumptions are fueled by our own insecurities, and in many cases, they do not reflect reality. If we continue to base our responses on these unfounded assumptions, we may act defensively or shut ourselves off emotionally from others, which only serves to deepen the divide between us and them. In relationships, the damage caused by assumptions can be particularly profound. We often expect our partners to just know what we want or need without having to explain it. But the truth is, no matter how well someone knows you, they cannot read your mind. When our partners fail to meet our unspoken expectations, we feel hurt or unloved. The solution here, according to Ruiz, is again clear communication. Don't assume your partner knows what you're feeling. Tell them. Express your needs openly and without judgment, and encourage them to do the same. By removing assumptions from the relationship, you create an environment where both people feel heard, valued, and understood. Another aspect of not making assumptions involves the stories we tell ourselves about situations or people. Often, these stories are constructed based on limited information or our past experiences. We project our fears, insecurities, or unresolved issues onto others, assuming they are acting in ways that align with these narratives. This creates a barrier between us and reality. To break this cycle, we must cultivate awareness of our thoughts and be willing to challenge the assumptions we make. By questioning our own narratives, we can begin to see situations and people more clearly without the distortions of our fears and biases. One of the most powerful outcomes of following this agreement is emotional freedom. When we stop making assumptions, we free ourselves from the unnecessary drama and emotional turmoil they create. We can approach situations with an open mind, from a curious rather than defensive place. We give people the benefit of the doubt and allow ourselves to be pleasantly surprised by their honesty or actions, rather than assuming the worst. This shift in mindset leads to healthier relationships, less stress, and greater peace of mind. This also means that you take the power over your emotions back and take responsibility for your wishes and desires, without blaming or criticizing others for not being how you think they ought to be. Ruiz emphasizes that this agreement is not always easy to live by. Making assumptions is so ingrained in how we think that it often happens automatically. But like any new habit, with practice, it becomes easier. The more aware we become of our tendency to assume, the more we can consciously choose to seek clarity instead. It can in general be worthwhile to think seriously about how much in our thoughts, words, and actions happens automatically, without us even reflecting over that we have a choice, and how much of this is actually dysfunctional and causes disharmony both within ourselves, in our lives, and in our interactions with other people. A practical step in applying this agreement is thus to observe yourself throughout the day. Whenever you feel upset, stressed, or angry, ask yourself, am I making an assumption here? Did I communicate clearly, or am I assuming the other person understands what I want? Am I sure that the other person's behavior means what I think it does? By bringing awareness to these moments, you can catch assumptions before they spiral into conflict or emotional distress. As you can see, this is to a large degree about your relationship with yourself and how you communicate with yourself. Are you just allowing one voice to speak in your head without questioning it, or do you have a more conscious, dynamic approach to your inner life? The practice of mindfulness, paying attention to your thoughts and emotional responses, can help you identify assumptions in real time. It enables you to stop, reflect, and choose a different approach, one rooted in curiosity and communication rather than presumption and defensiveness. Over time, this will lead to more harmonious relationships and a deeper sense of emotional well-being. In summary, the third agreement teaches us to avoid assumptions by fostering clear communication and seeking understanding. It encourages us to question the stories we tell ourselves and to be open to hearing others' truths. When we let go of assumptions, we free ourselves from the mental and emotional suffering they cause, paving the way for deeper, more authentic connections with others. This agreement is a powerful tool for cultivating inner peace and improving the quality of our relationships. By practicing this agreement, we create space for truth, connection, and clarity, not only in our relationships with others, but in our relationship with ourselves. Just like with the other agreements, the third agreement is about a shift in perspective. It's a more responsible, intentional, and harmonious approach to how we handle our interactions with other people, where we take ownership of our thoughts, words, and actions, and use them to seek the best outcomes rather than follow the dictates of the ego. It is so easy to forget that we only have access to the contents of our own minds, and that we cannot know for sure what is going on in the mind of another. This gives us the freedom to choose the best response in line with our highest values, rather than do what we think we have to in order to defend a fantasy about who we are against our fantasies, about what others might think and intend. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.